but with some reservations. And I was watching it. I'm like, man, like what? Like, because at that time, I really thought that we were going to blow their doors off. and I couldn't, and like everyone asked me why I thought that. And there was no stat I could point to. There was no data I could point to. My soul was still crushed from the prior week. But like, what was your reasoning at that moment in time? You just want to let people know, because I do think it's important for people to know, like, because that was a very important. I think that was one of the more important times in Ohio State football over the last 10, 20 years. What was your reason for picking Ohio State in that game against Tennessee, that really crucial game?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that video, because that video still gets comments to this day from Ohio State fans. It's still one of our highest performing videos to this day, not for any good reason, because it's just people calling Dolan an idiot for saying Tennessee's going to win that game. But I did pick Ohio State, and I also want to point out I did pick Ohio State preseason to win the national title too, so I'm glad I got that right. But I think the reason why Dolan picked Tennessee, and the reason why I was at least hesitant to pick Ohio State going into that game was, I mean, that offensive line was not looking good at all. They single-handedly lost that Michigan game. And while Tennessee's defensive line wasn't as good as Michigan's, it still was an elite unit last year. Guys like James Pierce Jr., who was a first-round pick, and Omar Norman-Lott, who was a day 2 pick in the NFL draft too. Joshua Josephs is a star player on the edge too. So that was why we were a little reserved. And I think between the Michigan game, and also the offensive line was struggling even before the Michigan game too. Mm-hmm. Like it was a big weakness of the team since the Oregon game, really, when Josh Simmons went down with that injury. So that was why we were a little hesitant to pick them. But I thought they did a great job in the playoff of just completely changing their run schemes to playing a lot more gap-heavy runs. And then also, playing a lot better in pass protection, too, against some elite defensive lines like Tennessee and like Oregon and Texas and stuff like that, too. So credit to them, man. I thought Chip Kelly did a great job of changing up the scheme, the run scheme, that offensive line, and then also the O-line is playing a lot better too down the stretch of the season when it really mattered. But that was why we were a little hesitant with Ohio State, is because the offensive line against that Tennessee defensive line was on paper a mismatch for Ohio State.
Oh no, I agree. When I look back on it, and I really want to talk about that offensive line. I will soon here, but no, when I look back on it, just the defensive lines that Ohio State had to play in that playoff, I had no idea that we were going to go. I didn't have us beating Oregon, and I got a lot of flack from the fan base on that. I do think at the 11th hour I picked Ohio State out of pure bias, but no, man, let's get started here. A few questions I wanted to ask you regarding the 2025 Buckeyes. So first question here. So your 2025 preview of Ohio State, and everyone, if you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. The full video, it's a great watch. A lot of information there that actually, if you're not subscribed to PFF, you should probably go do that too, because there's a lot of good information on there that if you want to use it against T-Ton fans, you like someone is saying that Blake Corum is better than Eddie George, things like that, you can go check it out on. But you talked about how when you went back and checked the PFF over the last over the history, never has there been the two best players on one team. So what do you think that says about Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs separately, and about this upcoming season for the Ohio State Buckeyes?
Listen, they had 14 players that were drafted, which is tied for the second most ever. And when you see that, you think, oh, man, it could be a hangover type of year. But then you're like, oh, wait, they're still the two best players in college football, and Jeremiah Smith and Kale Downs. And both of those guys are generational type of talents at their positions. Jeremiah Smith lived up to the hype immediately as a wide receiver, the highest rated receiver ever coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. And, people were wondering how they would replace Marvin Harrison Jr., and then they quickly forgot about Marvin Harrison Jr., even though he's a legendary player, because of how good Jeremiah was. So it's just unbelievable when he can come in and be that good immediately. And then Caleb Downs, I think he's the best player in next year's draft, because Jeremiah is not eligible for next year's draft. Caleb has just been a superstar safety ever since his true freshman year at Alabama. And now back-to-back years, I think he's entered the year as the best safety in college football. And that hasn't happened, right? It's very rare for a player to be the best player at his position for multiple years in college football, considering usually when you're the best player, you move on to the NFL. Caleb's been that good at a young age too, just like Jeremiah Smith was. So those two guys, in my opinion, are the best players in the country, bar none, really. And I think, honestly, the two best players in the country, Jeremiah's best offensive player in the country and the best overall player. And I think Kale Downs is the best defensive player in all of college football, too.
Do you think that, some people think that Ohio State's defense is going to struggle this season, or I don't want to say struggle, but take a step back, and naturally they should take a step back. After you win a national championship, you have all these guys leave for the NFL draft. It's only right for you to take a step back. Now, of course, the question is how much. So I believe that for Ohio State, at every single level, they bring back key players. Now, of course, at the defensive line position, it's a little iffy because you have Kenyatta Jackson Jr., who did start one playoff game. You have Edric Houston, who I think started maybe 2 games last season for Tyleek. Then you go to the linebacker spot. You have Sonny Styles. Corner, you have Davidson Ignosin. And then you have Jermaine Matthews, who I believe has been the best corner on this team for the past year. And then you have Caleb Downs at safety. But sticking with Caleb Downs, what do you think his impact is for this basically new defense?
Massive. He was a guy that, and I know Jim Knowles is gone now, who I thought was the best D coordinator in the country, but you got Caleb Downs, who is just a guy you could put anywhere. And what Jim Knowles did, especially in that playoff run, was he basically played like almost a Mike linebacker role, but a little bit deeper than what linebacker would play. And that opened up the door for all sorts of possibilities for Ohio State's defense. And he's just an amazing player overall. And just that kind of player where you could put him literally everywhere and he'll succeed. It's just such a valuable player in that defense. And I still think it's going to be a really good defense overall. I think, you have a guy like Caleb Downs, who's the best defensive player in the country. The secondary has some really nice pieces too, like Davidson Ignosin and Jermaine Matthews, like you mentioned him before too. Maybe we'll see Devin Sanchez in his true freshman year, the highly rated 5-star recruit coming out of high school to a corner. The linebacker unit I like too. Sonny Styles, I think, is a top 10 linebacker in the country. And the trenches on both sides of the ball is probably the biggest question mark for Ohio State. But there are guys I think have very high ceilings, like Kenyatta Jackson, who I've talked to a lot of people in the NFL draft community already. They're high on him for next year's draft too. So there's guys to like on the defensive line, and there's guys to love in that secondary and linebacker unit. I still think even without Jim Knowles and even after losing so many players on that defense, it should still be one of the better defenses in college football next year.
Okay, so all right, the offensive line. So when it comes to the offensive line, I am bullish on them. I think that the interior play was very good in the I won't say very good, right? I do think that Chip Kelly was able to scheme some things up in the playoffs for the new offensive line. Of course, you lose Josh Simmons. You moved Donovan Jackson over to left tackle, but now he's gone. And by the way, I thought him playing at left tackle boosted his draft stock immensely. This upcoming season, you have Carson Hinsman. He was the starting center in 2023, lost his job in 2024. But what do your numbers say about this offensive line this upcoming season, including with the transfers?
Yeah, that's one. Again, the trenches are where I'm a little concerned. I think it'll be an okay offensive line overall. It was an okay offensive line overall last year too. I believe it was the 63rd highest graded offensive line in the country last year. And I know they got better in the playoff, which is key. But you lose a first round left tackle in Josh Simmons. You lose a first round guard in Donovan Jackson. You lose a Remington Award winning center in Seth McLaughlin. The 5 starters right now for their depth chart are all guys who had below a 70 PFF grade last year. And usually like a 70 grade is usually like, okay, you're a pretty solid, pretty good player. Below that is where you start to say, okay, you're either an okay player or a below average player. So all 5 starters are below that 70 mark last year. Now, all 5 could get better, right? We see guys time and time again get better, especially at offensive line in college. But even guys like Ethan Anianwa, who a lot of people are excited about, the Rice transfer, even he had a sub 70 PFF grade last year at the group of 5 level. So I am a little concerned about that offensive line again, because it was kind of the weakness of the team last year, the one really only weakness you could find on the team last year. And they lost, or you could argue, their 3 best offensive linemen in Simmons and Donovan Jackson and Seth McLaughlin too. So that's why I'm a little more concerned with that offensive line and the defensive line too than a lot of other people are.
When I look at the offensive line, for me personally, so Ethan Anianwa is going to be interesting to see what's like. It's a step up in competition. This isn't Rice. It's Ohio State now. I mean, you even think about Josh Simmons when he came up from San Diego State. That first season, man, he struggled, and then somehow in 3 games he became a first-round pick. And then you look at guys like Seth McLaughlin. Now, though, for me personally, I told everyone, listen, the guy did start for Nick Saban for 3 years, so I believe he's going to be a good player. But that season before Ohio State wasn't pretty. A lot of snap problems. Watching that game against the Wolverines was completely disgusting. But I mean, for Ohio State, it was fine. I do think that, and that's why, though I believe that the O-line will be better this season, just the guys as individual players, I do think that that's where a guy like Tyler Bowen comes in handy. Coming over from Penn State, a guy that's been good. He's a recruiting coordinator, but also his calling card has been the run game. Not so much developing offensive linemen as a guy like Justin Fry is, but I do think that's where I am kind of happy, because though I am very bullish on Luke Montgomery, I think he's a budding star. For the 3rd year in a row now, I'm concerned about the right side of the offensive line. I'm not sure why it's always the right side of the offensive line for Ohio State, but but I do agree with you though. I think that for the first probably few games, especially, you have Brian Hartline as a new OC, you have a new quarterback. I know a guy that you guys are high on in Max Clare. I do think with a relatively new offensive line, having a really good tight end is a quarterback's best friend. And then, having a guy like Jeremiah Smith, I guess, is okay too. But great stuff there. So my third question, it does have to do with the defensive line, as you were just talking about. So the only full-time starter on this defensive line is Bo Atkinson, and that's coming from North Carolina. Like you said, there are a lot of question marks with them surrounding this defensive line. Though I think the first 4, if I'm talking Kenyatta Jackson Jr., Caden McDonald, Edric Houston, Bo Atkinson, and also I'll add in Caden Curry there, because I've seen glimpses of him make plays. I'm comfortable with those 4 to 5 guys. The depth, though, I think that's where a lot of Ohio State fans are worried. I'm somewhat worried. How do you feel about the defensive line and the depth for Ohio State this upcoming season?
Yeah, it's a little concerning considering you lost just superstars on that defensive line, and it was a major reason why they won the national title last year, because of guys like Jack Sawyer and Tyleik Williams and JT Tuimoloau and guys like that. I do like some of the talent they have. I think Kenyatta Jackson, like I said, will be a breakout player this year. I think he'd have a really good year. I think Edric Houston, who was nearly a 5-star recruit coming out a couple of years ago at D tackle, he could be a really good player too. But you're right. I mean, there's not a lot of proven stars right now at Ohio State. Now, they've recruited well on the defensive line. We'll see how those guys do. But I think it's not going to be nearly as good as last year's defensive line was, obviously. And that, again, is why the trenches really is the biggest question mark, both offensive line and defensive line for the Buckeyes right now.
If you had to pick one shining moment, if you had to pick like one guy to like shine this season that hasn't yet on the defensive line of the guys we're talking about here, who would it be?
I think it had to be Kenyatta Jackson. I think there's. Again, I've talked to a lot of people that cover the NFL draft and only look at college players as future NFL players and look at them through that lens. And they watch Kenyatta Jackson. They go, yeah, I know it's on a limited sample size, but man, this guy flashes whenever he's out there. So I think he could be the next edge rusher from Ohio State that could become, I don't know about a first-round pick, but I think maybe a day 2 selection if he has a great year. Like, I think that's certainly in the cards for him. Again, no one's really talking about him right now because he didn't really play that much last year, but he is a guy that I'm really excited to watch this year as a full-time starter, and whether or not he can live up to that kind of potential that he flashed in limited time last year.
For me, one of the games I look at was the Notre Dame game when he started, because there was JTT was out, and I think JTT is I think he's going to be like a kind of like a Rashawn Gary, where he's better in the NFL than he was in college. Simply because he's a freak athlete. But he was really good at the run, and I was always worried because Kenyatta, he's not small, but he's slender compared to JTT. And like when I looked at that game, I did get some confidence in there from him because I knew that Notre Dame was going to run the ball. Now, granted, the quarterback threw it all up after the first drive, but after that, I kind of that was the first time I ever saw my team get drilled, like just ran down, scored on, and then I knew we were going to win the game. Yeah. I've never felt that way in my life. It was a funny moment.
Sorry, real quick, we were at that game, Dawn and I, and I remember when they scored, Dawn and I looked at each other, and we saw Riley on the sideline not feeling very well, like you said, and we looked at each other like, this game's over. Like, this game is like it's 7-0 Notre Dame, and it's like this Ohio State's winning this game. Like, there's just no way Notre Dame's gonna be able to sustain this kind of, because it was just legit, like you mentioned, there's just quarterback power like every single play. It's like you can't do that. Like, Riley Leonard's gonna get killed out there if he has to do that every single play. So yeah, and you could see after one drive, he was already throwing up on the sideline. So yeah, I'm with you. It was funny to put it that way, saying this game's over for a team that's losing, that you're gonna say, oh, they're definitely winning this game now. But yeah, after one drive, Dawn and I had the same reaction. Like, no, Ohio State's winning this game. There's just no way Notre Dame's gonna win like this.
No, I truly wondered. It's so funny because when they played Georgia. No, I won a lot of money on that game because I told a lot. I don't know why I felt this way. Well, I know why, but I told people that Georgia had no chance of winning that football game. I just felt like that I couldn't see it. I'm not a Gunner fan. I think he looks like a 1400s English king. Even look at his profile. But I don't. Wait, real quick. What are your thoughts on him? I'm gonna stop.
So I think he was put in a bad spot because being inserted as a starter against Texas and against Notre Dame, or two of the elite defenses in the country, that's a tough spot to put in, especially for a guy who's a backup all year. I'm with you though. I think if I had to bet right now, and maybe with a full offseason as a starter, he gets a lot better. I think it could be a pretty big downgrade from Carson Beck, and I think Carson Beck's a pretty good quarterback. Actually, I'm still on that.
Here.
I think he's a really good quarterback. I think Georgia let him down in a lot of ways last year, but with a brand new interior, that offensive line, I'm worried about for Georgia. First off, then the receiving core maybe got a little bit better, but not that much better either, and that was a big problem with them last year too. I'm worried about Gunnar Stockton going into next year. I'm worried about Georgia's offense going into next year too.
So, without naming Caleb Downs or Jeremiah Smith, who do you think? Give me two players who you believe can be PFF All-Americans at the end of the season.
Good question. I would say Max Clare at tight end. I had Clare as my number 3 tight end in college football going into the year.
Who behind Sadiq and who else?
No, I had Eli Stowers from Vanderbilt and Jack Endries, who was at Cal and now is at Texas.
I gotta look them up because I always feel like Sadiq is the one guy I always hear.
Sadiq is the guy. I had him 6th. The thing with Sadiq is I think he might have the most potential of any tight end in the country. He just was the backup last year behind Ferguson. So the numbers just I couldn't put him at number 1 because of the numbers. But potential wise, he's going to be up there, and he should have a great year at Oregon this year. But Clare was Purdue's leading receiver at tight end. He was really their entire passing game last year. And now he's going to be the number 3 option at least at Ohio State this year, which it sounds like a bad thing for his numbers, but it's almost a good thing too because defenses can't key in on him, right? So up the seams, the guy like Julian Sayin, we even saw in the spring game, Julian Sayin threw a beautiful touchdown pass to Max Clare. I think that connection is going to be really big next year because defenses will, of course, be doubling Jeremiah Smith on the outside, and you got to account for Carnell Tate on the outside too, but Max Clare up the seams could put up big numbers next year, and honestly, could be the best tight end that Ohio State's had in a very long time. Honestly, I can't remember the last time Ohio State had a day 2 pick at tight end. I think I looked it up; it was a long time ago. Max Clare could break that streak for the Buckeyes next year.
And who would be the second guy?
Yeah. So I would probably say I'd probably go with Sonny Styles. I think Styles is like a top 10 linebacker in the country. He's a guy that former safety, former top 5 recruit coming out of high school. He still covers like a safety, and which is amazing for a linebacker. And he got a lot better as a physical run defender too. I don't think he's one of the 4 or 5 best linebackers in the country, but I believe I ranked him 6th in my linebacker ranking. So he could maybe get like a third team All-American nod in 2025. I could definitely see that happening for him.
Awesome. And by the way, on Max Clare, I do think that talent-wise, he's probably the best tight end Ohio State's ever had. The only guy in my lifetime that I could compare to him is probably Jeremy Ruckert. And we didn't really use him. Somehow Cade Stover got used more than Jeremy Ruckert. Never understood that, but no, I love those picks. So, man, last question before you go. How do you think the Buckeyes fare in 2025?
I think this is a playoff team. I think this is a team that can still win the Big Ten. I'm not going to pick them to win the Big Ten, but I think they are definitely one of the top contenders to do so. This is a team I think that can make it to at least the quarterfinal round, if not the semifinal round. I don't think this is a national championship contending team in 2025. I think they're kind of a year away. They have a lot of guys that are still very young players. Like obviously Jeremiah Smith is only a true sophomore. Julian Sain is a redshirt freshman at quarterback too. A lot of young players. I think 2025 will kind of be a retooling and reloading year, I should put it, for Ohio State with so many young guys in the defense too. I think 2026 is when you see Ohio State make another run at a national title. So I think they're still going to make the playoff. I still think they're going to be like a top 5-ish team in the country. And I still think this is maybe a Final Four team too. But I don't think this is a team that will win a back-to-back national championship.
Yeah. I love my Buckeyes. I love them. I came out of my mom's womb. My dad put a bib on me. By the way, Max, I'm a Michigan-born Buckeye. I'm Michigan-born and bred.
Wow.
But luckily, my dad got his degree from the correct university. And it's hard for me to see it, like to pick them to go back to back. I think my choices have been, I said Clemson or Texas. Those are the 2 teams I've. And depending on what the quarterback looks like at Bama, I think outside of Ohio State and Texas, I think including those guys, I think Bama is the most talented team in college football. Yeah. But it's hard for me to see it. I do think that if Ohio State were to win a national championship this season, I think they'll be in the same position that 2014 was. That was a year early. I didn't think Ohio State was going to win that year when like Zeke Elliott was a sophomore and Bosa was a sophomore and all those guys. I do think that 2026 is the year to watch Ohio State. Now, sadly, Caleb Downs will be gone, but I agree with you there. I think they can make the playoffs. I have about 6 teams that I think could possibly win it. Ohio State is in there, but I think a lot of things have to go right. You gotta hope that BH is a demon at playing calls. You gotta hope that I have faith in Matt Patricia and the guys in this defense, but you gotta hope that gels together pretty well and quick, especially before you play Penn State at home. You have Texas at home the first week. Tough games against Illinois, teams like that. Play at Washington. There's a lot of things that could. There's things that could happen. It's not that the Big Ten, despite what SEC fans may think, is actually sometimes pretty tough. But Max, I truly appreciate you coming on here, man. I asked you maybe 4 or 5 days ago, and you said, yeah, I really do appreciate you, man. Hopefully have you back on soon. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you and any upcoming stuff you guys have coming up?
Yeah, of course. So you can find me on Twitter at CFB Max Chadwick. And then, of course, the PFF College Football Show is available on YouTube and anywhere you get podcasts. We're currently previewing every single Power 4 team. Actually, just today we did the Big 12. Last week, of course, was the Big 10. So the Ohio State preview is already up on the channel if you want to go check it out. And we've got one more conference to go in the ACC. And then pretty soon we're making our season predictions for Heisman Trophy, National Championship, and then start previewing week 0 and going from there, man. So we're only a few weeks away now. It feels kind of crazy saying that, but it should be a wild year this year. I think, not to brag, but I did get the last 2 national title winners right, and the only 2 I've ever picked at PFF. I don't think I'm going to go 3 for 3 this year. I genuinely, I had a feeling about Ohio State last year. I was like, this team's just so loaded. I think I'm with you. I think I'm going to go with Clemson this year. But, dude, it is wide open.